Tēnā koutou katoa ko Sarah Lang tako ingoa, and welcome to our second National WIN webinar. This has been a pretty tough year for all of us, and even though we perhaps haven't achieved everything we want, I say at the moment, let's celebrate putting one step ahead of each other this year. Today, we have a really important webinar for our WIN network. We have 4 leaders of the procurement sector talking with us today to over 300 WIN members from around the country. I'd like to make a shout out to our WIN members in Northland, right down to our WIN members in Queenstown. We have 306 of you joining this call today. I'd also like to acknowledge the WIN Advisory Board members, our WIN committee chairs and committees, and we also have a couple of male champions on the call today. So thanks very much for everybody for joining us. Just a couple of heads up for you. So this year, as many of you know, WIN has organised firstly a seminar or a national webinar earlier this year. We had a lot of people dialing into that one. We've had a number of webinars organised by chapters, and we've even had a few live events. Certainly a highlight for me was the Clyde Dam Tour organised between our Dunedin WIN chapter and our Queenstown WIN chapter, which attracted about 50 women from across the country to look at working in that sector. It was a fantastic day in central Otago, a delicious lunch, a couple of glasses of wine, and a lot of learning for us all. So look, thanks for joining us today. We have a really full program. We have 4 fantastic speakers. We have a great number of questions that have already come through from some of the attendees. Thank you. And then we will open up to our audience. So if you have any questions that you would like us to write, to answer, please send them through and we will put those to our 4 panelists who are joining today. So just a heads up for how we're going to run. Each of our 4 panelists is going to give a little bit of an introduction to who they are, what they do, how they got into the procurement area, what they enjoy about their role and their challenges. So we're going to have an introduction from Andrea Morton from Kaingaora first. We then head to Alison Murray from the Ministry of Education, and then across to NZTA with Tara McMillan and Alice Bray. A fantastic lineup, absolutely, which is really the reason probably why we've got such a big audience today. So look, let's get started. We're going to kick off right now with Andrea. Andrea, over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Good afternoon to everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to come and speak today. Hey, as Sarah said, I'm Andrea Morton. I'm with Kaingaora Homes and Communities, and for those of you that may not know our background, we're a relatively new Crown entity that was formed 1 October last year out of the consolidation of Housing New Zealand, HLC, our subsidiary that was formerly known as Hobsonville Land Company, and then Homes, Lands and Communities, and the Kiwi Build program. So I led the procurement function at Kaingaora, and prior to that I led the procurement function at Housing New Zealand. I joined Housing New Zealand in 2013, and at that stage we had a procurement team of about 5 people, including myself. We spent approximately a couple of $100 million on maintenance and built about 100 houses. To give you an idea of how much has changed over that time, this year we will build 2,500 new public homes. We are retrofitting a large number of others. We spend approximately $500 million on maintenance, and our total capital budget is about $2.5 billion. Going forward, we'll spend approximately $50 billion over the next 20 years. I think we are the 2nd largest capital investment agency behind NZTA now. And we've got huge regeneration programs happening in different parts of the country. We've got 6 happening in Auckland and 1 in Wellington here in Porirua. So what's my story and background? How did I get into procurement? I got into procurement before I even knew really what it was as a career. My pathway, I wouldn't be doing what I do now bizarrely, if I hadn't gone waitressing when I was at high school and waitressed all the way through uni. I was quite a shy kid, and I'm still kind of introverted. So going out and talking to folks like this is definitely a little bit outside my comfort zone. But certainly waitressing pushed me out of my comfort zone when I was younger, and that actually put me into sales. So I did sales in the ICT sector for most of my 20s. And then I went and jumped the fence to manage ICT suppliers at a state-owned enterprise, got into the commercial space, and ultimately moved into procurement, managing the entire life cycle. Through that, I realised I needed a little bit more grunt after having a BA in political science, which means I know a whole lot about very little, and went and did a postgrad in com law to help with the commerce side of things as well, and round out my understanding of actually what it was I was meant to be doing and how to go about doing it. Why procurement? Look, as I said, when I got into procurement, I didn't really know what it meant. These days, I think it is absolutely the engine room of so many businesses. So many organisations don't self-perform. We all need to work across the commercial spectrum to be able to do what it is that we want to do, whether we're in the private sector or the public sector. And procurement is absolutely at the engine room of that. And how I describe procurement, what I love about it is it's commercial smarts with heart. And going forward, I think that's a really huge component. Historically, procurement has probably been more on that commercial smarts and a lot of process stuff. The stuff that really appeals to so many of us these days is the ability for the dollar to make a real difference in communities, and the social procurement and sustainable outcomes we can get in association with the commercial benefits we get in working across suppliers and all of the sectors that we engage with. So for me, that commercial smarts with heart is a real appealing factor for procurement. But the last thing that Sarah asked me to comment on before I hand over to some of the other fabulous women I'm on this call with and have the privilege of working with many of them day to day, when we talk about cross-sector collaboration, is what do I bring to the room? It's always a harder one to reflect on oneself. Hopefully a sense of humour, definitely a collaborative approach, and a dedication to doing the right thing, even when it's hard or unpopular. And that is one of the things about procurement. We have never been the sexiest of professions. We're certainly the people that sometimes tell folks you can't do it that way, but we can get you there that way. And sometimes that's an unpopular thing. So being comfortable with not being the most popular person in the room, but having that dedication to do the right thing to get the right outcomes is something I think I bring to the table. So in a nutshell, that's a summary for me. And I'm happy to hand back to Sarah and hear some more about the other fabulous women on the call.
Look, thank you very much, Andrea. You have a very big job, a job that's also been obviously in the media a lot. Housing is a very key issue. So just as well, you have very broad shoulders and you're able to carry that load. So thanks for sharing your journey with us. Now, we'd like to head over to the Ministry of Education. We have Alison Murray on the line with us now, who's going to talk a little bit about her journey in procurement. Across to you, Alison. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah. And I'm really honoured to be asked to talk today. So hi, everybody. And hopefully what I've got to say is interesting. The struggle is to try and fit it into 5 minutes. So in terms of my role, so I'm the Director of Commercial Procurement within Education Infrastructure Service. So that's a group within the Ministry of Education. So the group covers not only school property, but also school transport, payroll, and technology in schools, so Wi-Fi, broadband. In terms of the team size, I manage a team of about 56 people, both here in Wellington, Christchurch, and Auckland. And spend-wise, so the ministry in the property or infrastructure space, it spends around $1 billion a year at the moment, and that's forecast to grow. Still quoting a few numbers, managing out from planning through to contracting, we have about 1.5 billion that procurement are actually working on at the moment in terms of that space, plus another 2 billion for those other services, which is across payroll, transport, and other services which is actually either out in the market or about to go out to the market. So the team here in EIS, in terms of procurement, manage some really large scale numbers and volume of activities as well. So that's a little bit about education. In terms of me, how did I get into the role? So I moved to New Zealand about 10 years ago. I worked with ACC when I moved here for about 3 years, managing the health procurement team there. So a similar sized team and around 2 billion spend. But I then decided to go contracting. And at that point, I was introduced to a possible role at the Ministry of Education to bring in some panels and to look at supply management. So 6 years ago, I joined education, started as a contractor, and then my role and activities grew from particular activity to other challenges and other projects of working with the ministry in terms of their journey, in terms of delivering school property, becoming a client of choice, looking at some of those social outcomes and value that we need to deliver, to becoming a permanent employee a couple of years ago and to now managing the team. So I joined a bit like Andrea when the team was about six or seven people, and now we've got quite a substantial team. So not only in terms of the recognition in terms of infrastructure spend that we have to deliver, but also the importance of procurement in terms of the value that we deliver in terms of delivering those outcomes. So that's a little bit about my role. In terms of my journey, oh my God, let's give some warts and alls then. Right, so I did physics, chemistry and maths at A-level, was planning to be an engineer and then discovered socialising. So decided then to, I suppose, switch to a business degree because my results were pretty appalling. So I was going to be an engineer, a bit like a lot of you out there, but so I did a business degree, and as part of that, it was a thin sandwich course of 4 years, 2 6 months with an organisation. Those were with Michelin Tires, and part of that was in the purchasing department. Procurement wasn't even known. So a bit like Andrea, I came into buying as a career choice. So when I worked with Michelin Tires, 3 months in their buying department, and what grabbed me was the challenge of getting a great deal. So that time it was about negotiation and saving money, and I loved it. So that's the career choice I went into. So I went into manufacturing when I graduated. So car manufacturing, heavily male dominated industry. So car manufacturing, then into the NHS and financial services until I moved to New Zealand. I was trying to think about how I could summarise some of those challenges and what I enjoyed around procurement. And for me, it was the ability to get a great outcome. So Toyota was a great grounding for me because they are an ethical buyer that focuses on, sorry, I didn't say that I worked for Toyota for 5 years. So they are an ethical buyer. They focus on partnerships and collaboration and the total cost and value rather than price. And I think that's underpinned my whole career, that the importance of relationships in terms of delivering the outcomes. And the fact that Toyota source maybe once in every 3 years, and the value that you maximize is from the relationship with those suppliers. And that's carried me throughout the rest of my career, and is completely the focus and what I try to bring in terms of any role that I work in. A few other bits in terms of personality, in terms of why me and why procurement and the challenges that I face and why I love procurement, is because my personality is that I like to build relationships. I'm a bit of a talker. I think I get the best out of listening, but also finding out from people what is it they want to achieve. And I did make some notes. Somebody told me the reason I did so well in a job is that I spent time listening as well as talking, and actually working out what the stakeholder or the client needed, rather than just trying to do something to them or for them, is actually what is the outcome you're trying to achieve. I did face some challenges in working in a male-dominated environment. I don't know if we have to be so explicit. I apologise, there's a couple of men on the line in the call. But I find that if you look at it in that way, if you actually look about what is it you're trying to achieve and focus on being present and actually doing the job rather than who you're working with. So what I said is you use humour, you question, don't sit back and hide. Relationships are key, and you have to show the value that you bring. And that actually is about procurement, because that isn't just about women and women working in the industry. That's about procurement as well. And I think that's what I think that why procurement is so challenging, because you can show the value that you can bring as part of our role. So that's my little spiel, and I'll hand back to Sarah.
Alison, thank you very much. And at risk of perhaps a dad joke here, this is a win network, and I think actually procurement is about win-wins. We want a win for everybody, so we want a great outcome. We want everybody to feel like they've had a win in the deal, and I think the collaborative nature of working and listening together, trying to put egos to the side, getting rid of that master-servant relationship and really looking at respect and that sort of collaborative way of working is a real benefit. Many women have those soft skills of communicating and listening, not to say that many men don't also, but I really think women bring a different way of working to this industry, which is just what we need.
Yeah. And it's not about ego, it's about the results.
Yeah, that's right. So look, thank you very much, Alison from the Ministry of Education. We are now going to turn to our friends at NZTA. Tara, can I hand over to you to tell us about your journey, please?
Thanks, Sarah. Ko Tara Macmillan aho e mahi ana aho mo wakatahi tēnā koutou katoa. Look, it's a real privilege to be here, and I definitely want to start by acknowledging Andrea and Alison and Alice, the three A's. It's a real privilege. We get to work a lot across government, and I can tell you that these three women are really punching above their weight and taking some amazing strides and making a big difference. So we're really privileged to have them in our profession and also in the public sector. I'm gonna start with a bit of a whistle-stop tour of my career to date, and there's certainly some synergies with their preceding two amazing women. And look, when I reflect on my career, it firmly falls into these three phases. So the first phase I call fondly the Bunsen and Beaker days. Those of you that know the Muppets will know that Bunsen was forever creating these little experiments, and 9 times out of 10 Beaker would get hurt in them. So the first phase for me was really characterized by experimentation. I was one of those kids that left school, had no idea what I wanted to do, and so I did a lot of different things, and some worked out better than others. A real turning point for me is when I left Perth, where I grew up, and this horrific 3-day bus trip over to Sydney. And I managed to get in the foot in the door with a multinational organisation, which is George Weston Foods in the bakeries division. Now, I joined in a trade marketing coordinator role, and that role was quite pivotal for me because it didn't just give me exposure to sales and marketing, but also exposure to complex supply chains, so baking and distributing fresh daily product all over the state and interstate. And it was there that I really started to enjoy how all the connected parts of an operation came together. So, securing all the right raw materials at the right price to develop a new profitable product line, grocery store ranging, and then above and below the line advertising. And then I remember vividly the day that the CEO and the operations director pulled me into a meeting in their office, and they'd caught wind that I'd been offered a role over at the state office. I thought I'd done something wrong. I was extremely nervous coming in, but only to be offered a newly created role, which just happened to be a procurement manager role. And I literally fell into procurement, as so many do. And I thank my lucky stars that I was provided that opportunity. I was also really lucky to be with an organisation that aided my development. So not just the hands-on experience, but also the education and training that went along with it. And that gave me a fantastic foundation. And to this day, I've really enjoyed doing that study and that education where you can actually apply it straight away. And it certainly helped me along the way. Look, and it was an organisation that continued to invest in my development. I worked hard. I did a lot of extra experimentation, so crossing over role boundaries just to get involved in other projects and to build some additional experience. And I was offered a role to come to New Zealand and look after their supply chain over here. And that for me kicked me into phase 2, which I call the Jean Batten days. So as you know, Jean's journey is well known, navigating a really male-dominated world, learning to fly, successfully completing a number of solo flights. So I knew no one when I came over here, and I was given this opportunity to take independent accountability of a functional area. And I still remember the looks on the faces of my suppliers the first time I met them. And as you can imagine, I was very young and very different to the retiring, outgoing supply chain manager I was replacing. And look, it was a great experience. And I think when you reflect on your experience, it's important to know that, you know, you don't always get it right. And I'll share a little bit of one of my war stories where I ordered in some sun-made raisins. We had this beautiful sun-made raisin loaf. I over-ordered. I ended up with an additional container of these raisins, and you know, and that represented another 12 months of stock. And on top of that, I actually then found out that we were discontinuing the product. So, you know, you learn and you live from these experiences, and it certainly taught me a bit along the way. And then the next 10 years, I really bounced between Australia and New Zealand across different industries. So I went into mining, went into grocery, and into electricity. But I loved the supply chain and the procurement foundations because they are completely transferable no matter what industry that you go in. I found myself leading teams where I was the youngest in the team, and the teams were dominated by men, situations where I was brought in over the top of existing team members. They didn't know it was coming, and other roles where I was able to build a team from scratch. And every situation, role, and team provide an opportunity for me to learn and grow. And what I've grown to love is building and unlocking the potential of diverse teams, and particularly at times where there's complex problems that are needing to be solved. And look, over this time, I still continue to complement that hands-on experience with peppered, you know, education, particularly in the supply chain and procurement areas. And then more recently, I completed my MBA in 2016. Now, the reason I mention this is in the last semester of my MBA, we had an amazing career coach, and I thoroughly recommend having a career coach, Chris Johnson. And he took us through a series of exercises where we overlaid our personal values with looking back over the last kind of 10, 12 years of our roles and analysing the high points and what really made, you know, what you really loved doing at those points when you hit those high points in roles. And what that allowed us to do is set a set of personal criteria for assessing new opportunities. So that you avoid this following the least line of resistance as new opportunities present themselves. So kind of armed with this newfound focus, I then subsequently turned down a few opportunities until my current role came up with Waka Kotahi. And that really spoke to the value set alignment, this opportunity to come into the public sector and make a difference. So 2.5 years ago, I joined, you know, very excited, Waka Kotahi, the New Zealand Transport Agency, in my current role as leading the Centre of Excellence at Waka Kotahi in the procurement area. And that kicked off my current career phase, and I'm calling that leaving taonga, so leaving treasures. So we have currently around $2.5 billion worth of work in the market at the moment. So we are the largest long-term procurer in the state sector, and it's a very privileged position for us to be in. What's incredibly exciting in our profession currently is that procurement is being seen by government as a key enabler for delivering secondary benefits through our procurement activities. So across the state sector, we spend around $42 billion. So it allows us to leave an even greater legacy in the communities within which our projects are delivered by leveraging that procurement activity. Look, specific to construction, which is the lion's share of where our spend is, we know that construction projects have these really deep supply chains, and the faster that we can get our projects to market, spades in the ground, the faster that we can provide that much needed economic stimulus, particularly in the current COVID-19 environment. And when I look back in recent years, we've absolutely seen the impacts on the construction sector. So resulting from this lack of pipeline certainty, skills and labour shortages, the treatment and the management of risks in projects. And at the tender box, we're seeing some unsustainable pricing that comes through in it. And at the heart of this, our current forms of competition really are limiting the pursuit of shared and sustainable outcomes. So what we've been working on, which is incredibly exciting, is we've been leveraging international best practice, and now we're turning our minds to developing new infrastructure procurement approaches to really address these challenges head on. So at the heart of our new approaches, which are currently in design, we're looking to bring greater long-term certainty to industry. We're looking to adopt some different forms of competition and to enable a sustainable competitive industry whilst increasing collaboration towards shared outcomes. And it definitely is going to drive greater efficiencies and productivity in the long term. And that's something I'm really personally feel that we're in desperate need of. And look, I hope that for many of you who work in the companies which actually help us deliver our programs, and I saw many of you out there are on the list and get involved in our transport infrastructure projects. I'm hoping that you're going to see a shift in the next 12 to 24 months as we implement these changes. So coming back to my role, I get to pinch myself every day that I get to come to work and work with a fantastic team and a progressive government agency that's really empowering us to leave our taonga for the future. Back to you, Sarah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Tara. Certainly from our perspective at Infrastructure New Zealand, we run a survey every couple of years, and we can absolutely see the investment NZTA has put into upskilling procurement. We see NZTA as really sharing some of your best practice expertise across the country with other agencies, and we really look forward to what comes out of your next round of improvements. But staying with NZTA, I would now like to hand over to young Alice. Alice is an award-winning young procurer. In fact, this is a very good segue for me to talk about Infrastructure New Zealand's Excellence in Social Impact Award that we are going to be announcing at the gala dinner at Building Nations this year. Alice is one of our expert judges on the panel. Alice, talk to us a little bit about your superstar career at your young age, about your award and about your passion for social impact. Across to you, Alice. Thanks very much.
Oh, kia ora, Sarah. Kia ora tātou, ko rimutaka te maunga, ko te awa karangi te awa, no te whanganui a tara aho, ko Bray toku whānau, and ko Alice Bray toku ingoa. So thank you so much, everyone. It's a huge honour to be on this webinar today. I'm looking to my screen and I just see, you know, a powerful woman. And it is phenomenal. It's a huge privilege to be here. So Tara's given a fantastic insight into what we do here at Waka Kotahi, so I won't touch too much on that. But a bit of background about me. So I started my procurement career in 2017. I came out of university thinking I want to do something with people and in the public sector. So I did the usual, right, I'll go into policy, and was having some conversations with family friends, and one of them said over a coffee, have you thought about procurement? And I said, well, I don't actually know what procurement is. So can you tell me some more? And she said, oh, you know, it's relationships and, you know, contracts and purchasing. And I thought, oh, I've got a BA in political science, Andrea, international relations and sociology. So I don't know if that's going to be for me. And she said, no, relationships at the heart of it, people at the heart of it. The Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment have a procurement graduate program. You know, put in an application and see, you know, just see how you go. I thought, oh, okay, well, what's the harm in giving it a go, right? You know, the worst that can happen is it's a no and you try something else. So here we are. So 2020, the year that sort of challenged us all. So I've sort of dabbled in lots of different procurement fields, started out in corporate, had a bit of the social services experience, done IT, and now sitting in the amazing infrastructure sector, which is absolutely phenomenal. And I don't think my little sociologist brain ever imagined me coming into this career field. So it's a bit of a shout out to anyone who's at the beginning of their career and going, oh God, I don't know where I want to be in 10 years. You don't have to know. Just know that what you are going to do, you need to take your strengths, you need to plug your weaknesses, your opportunity areas, and go for it. And I guess why procurement? That's where I've sort of landed at the moment, and it took me a bit to get here. I loved it when I first started, but now it's just solidified why I am here. And procurement to me is similar to what Andrew was talking about with commercial smarts with hearts. Procurement's about impact. And although you may not know that you're procuring every day, you are. From the dollars that you spend on your lunch, to your coffee, to your clothing, to your house, to your electricity, everything that you spend money on is being procured by yourself. And there are ethical and unethical suppliers and sustainable suppliers and unsustainable suppliers and social enterprises, and there's all these sorts of other businesses who are in this arena which you can procure from. And that's kind of where we're at Waka Kotahi at the moment. It's going, look at our amazing supplier base, what more can we be doing and procuring for impact with them, in partnership with them, because we don't deliver by ourselves. We have to rely on our amazing supplier base to be able to deliver our impact. But as a public sector agency, we have the opportunity to make significant impact, and that's down to job creation, stimulating the local economy, all sorts of things that without the procurement function, there's the potential to lose track of these sorts of things because you've got so much to do in your day-to-day job. So that for me is why procurement is critical, and it really has undergone this evolution to buying some stuff, chucking it in a warehouse, and then we'll ship it out to people as they need it, or just buying stuff. And that's when I came into the community. That's typically how you would describe it, you know, at the barbecue with friends, because you'd say procurement and they go, I've got no idea what that is, and you're like, don't worry, I'll explain it to you. And now that I'm in my role here at Waka Kotahi in the sustainable procurement space, you know, implementing the broader outcomes program, the more I talk to people about what they can do through procurement in terms of it, you could change someone's life in terms of impacting their livelihood, and they go, wow, really? Cool. Well, how can we do that? So for me, that gives me real heart, and I know that there are so many people on the call who are working for organisations who have completely backed this idea of procurement for impact, broader outcomes. So for us, if we think about this sort of change in mindset from just purchasing, just buying stuff, to procuring for impact, that's a marathon. You know, that's behaviour change. That's not just procurement process, change a wee template and off we go. That stuff takes time. So I've been talking to a lot of our internal people about, if this is going to be a marathon, we're probably about 5K in. You know, we've got our trainers on, we've got our plan ready, we've got our stopwatch, we've got our water bottle, like we're prepped and ready to go. And now we've got to go. And it's going to be an endurance race. We've got to pace ourselves. We can't rush because, and I think we'll talk about it more later on, but partnership is at the heart of what we do. And that is partnership with our suppliers, that is our titiriti obligations and commitments, our partnership with our local communities. All these things have to happen in a way that is collaborative, but based on partnership, because that's equal players coming into a room where there's not an unequal dynamic of power, because that's where the true collaboration and heart is going to come from. So I'm just super passionate about that, and I could talk about it for hours. But I'll finish off with the two things that I bring to a room, because I really liked that from Andrea. For me, it's enthusiasm and why. So a lot of our project managers will be like, oh, Alice, she's going to ask me why, she's going to challenge me on this. And that's more just because I want to know. I want to know if there's a better way we could be doing this. I want to understand the purpose behind this, because maybe there's an opportunity to do better. And as a public sector agency, that should be something that is at the forefront of our minds every single day. How can we do better for the public that we are serving? So that's me, Sarah. I'll pass on back to you. Thank you.
Alice, you're so insightful at your young, tender age. We love you. We want to bottle you up, and we're so delighted you are helping us on our judging panel. So there you have it, everybody. 4 superstar, amazing women in the procurement space. Aren't we lucky to have them at the helm of these very big spends at this important time in the infrastructure sector? So thank you, ladies. I thought there might be a journey of waitressing in there. No, not all of us have done waitressing, but we did find out before that there's quite a lot of foodiness in this group. So I'm sure there must be some eating collaboration that can happen. What I really liked, Alice, was this for me. So Infrastructure New Zealand looks at procurement, and we've looked at it for a long time. And a big part of this is taking people on the journey with us. So it is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And if we run too fast, we will not take everybody on the journey with us. People only know what they only know. And it's our role to help expand their minds as to what else we can achieve through procurement. So it's really exciting to sometimes see the light switch flick on when people realise what other benefits or externalities can be achieved through procurement. Now, we are going to head into some questions now, and my first question is for Tara. Tara, this is for you. As a contractor, how can we deliver sustainability and social outcomes if clients continue to use a lowest price conforming model? Over to you, Tara.
That is a great question, fantastic question, and dear to our hearts. In fact, we've actually been having conversations this week with respect to our new approaches. So we do often hear that that lowest price conforming ends up being a race to the bottom, and it is not. It doesn't actually drive true outcomes. And look, I look at this through the lens of not just sustainability outcomes, but construction sector outcomes, our transport system outcomes, and it can drive the wrong behaviour. So one of the key reasons why we are looking at new infrastructure approaches is to again bring in a different form of competition. So competition not around the price and to drive value out, but be focused on how do we drive a competition around performance and outcomes achieved, and that's absolutely got to be driven by the client in terms of setting what we value and how we need to go about it, and then to be able to leverage our procurement activities to be able to set the direction for that. So what you'll see is a change and a shift over the next 12 to 18 months with respect to waka kotahi. We do currently, for a number of our projects, we do look at different procurement processes that don't drive that race to the bottom. We are very cautious on unsustainable bids, and making sure that we've got levers in place with our procurement activities to get away from just removing the quality and the guts out of the market. So that is in train. And we already have contract delivery models that create a lot more collaboration and procurement processes that drive towards the outcomes with respect to what we're trying to achieve, rather than just dollar. So I think the landscape is absolutely changing, and we're seeing it across government.
Look, fantastic, Tara. That's really at the heart of what we're trying to achieve. Now, another question which we have had come through from one of our viewers is in regard to mental health. And I'm going to put this question through to you, Andrea. Mental health is a key risk in the industry right now. In fact, one of our directors went as far to say it will be our greatest challenge that we face this year. How is mental health being addressed from a procurement level? What are you doing at Kāinga Ora about this?
Well, Sarah, I think that's really the question for 2020 in more ways than one. As Alice said, 2020 is the year that has challenged everybody and pushed people really in some instances to their limits. People have lost their jobs, loved ones might have lost their jobs. The separation with so many people working from home, the constraint where people haven't been able to get out onto the work site, and the linkage between identity and the work that you do can be really challenged in a year like this year. From a Kāinga Ora Homes and Communities perspective, we're a big supporter of Mates in Construction. This is the Women's Infrastructure Network. Women are possibly more likely to talk a little bit about what's going on for them. And Sarah, you mentioned the food conversation. There was also a conversation earlier that the conversations might be a little bit different over a glass of rosé perhaps in the evening than they might be at lunchtime. But I think there's a couple of things there. Unfortunately, the construction sector is overrepresented in harm, self-harm, and the dreadful outcomes that New Zealand sees in the suicide area. Mates in Construction is an awesome organisation that has had its origins in Australia and has come across to New Zealand and is doing some fabulous work on sites with some of our guys who in New Zealand are probably least likely to talk about actually what's going on for them, and they're under an enormous amount of pressure. So that ability to talk to a mate is absolute gold. We're a huge supporter of that. We are encouraging our suppliers to partner with that. And we've also been privileged to work with some of our maintenance contractors who already have been quite leading in this area and have been very concerned for the well-being of their staff. From our perspective, the language that we use internally is that we're concerned about the well-being of everybody that works for us. We have a couple of thousand people that we pay via payroll, but we have upwards of 12 to 15,000 people that work for us via our invoices. So we see it's incredibly important to support these conversations, to actually give people the support that they need through times of challenge. And to support their families and make sure they've got continuity. And one of the big things in construction sector, going back to what Tara was talking about, is a big risk for mental health is actually just not knowing where the work's coming in the future. So continuity of pipeline for us is a key enabler as well, being able to give multi-year contracts to businesses so that not only the head contractors, but that entire supply chain can have some continuity. That's a big step forward. And another step that we've done is pretty quickly on the emergence of the pandemic, we moved to paying invoices as quickly as possible to make sure that lack of certainty about when on earth is the money coming in so I can pay my guys and they can pay their bills, and just eliminating that for our supply chain. So we moved to payment within 7 days for all invoices that we possibly could. And that's from being matched, as you can imagine. It's not automatically since they've been submitted, but our current stats say that we're paying over 90% of our invoices within 10 days of them being submitted. So, and I haven't got the absolute stats on that right now, but those are just three of the ways that we're supporting the mental health and well-being of the workforce that works with us and delivering our outcomes.
Thank you very much, Andrea. That is very important at this time. I think, as we all know, this has been a very challenging year. I don't think it's going to end at the end of this year. And I think, as our Finance Minister showed yesterday, I think the tail of this is going to go on for some time. Alison, I'd like to head over to you now. So you've worked in a number of industries where the staff have been overwhelmingly male. How do you deal in a higher level role? And I don't know what it is. I said on our debrief that it seems to be me and 17 men. Every time there's a meeting, it's 17 men. And I don't know what it is about the number 17, but that's what it seems to be. But however, I would like to point out for those who are attending Building Nations this year, did you note my quick plug there? Our numbers of women have gone up to around 30% of the attending delegates. And I think WIN has been a very important part of that, but so too have senior women in the industry. Alison, how have you coped as being one of very few senior women? I think we have many of them on the call today, but how have you coped not only in procurement, but in the automotive industry and the other areas you've worked? How have you navigated that landscape so successfully?
I think, as I said, as part of my kind of intro to me and my career, in my mid-20s, when I worked with Toyota, I was actually buying steel, and I was one of the first women who worked as a steel buyer, not only within the UK manufacturing industry, but across Europe. But as part of that role, I was working with very senior sales executives of steel suppliers, which are probably 20 or 30 years older than me. And I think having the ability to have the backing of a key organization like Toyota, and just knowing that I had that organization behind me gave me the confidence to actually say, I do know what I'm doing, I do know my role, and it's all about the outcomes and actually discussion. So I didn't focus on that they were male and that they were more senior. I focused on, well, what was the outcome I was trying to achieve? So I've had this ability to actually not see whether they're male or female or, you know, or wherever their background, it's like, actually, what is it that you can bring to the table? So I never thought about, from my personal view, in terms of what sex we were. And because I could work in that way, whatever their behavior was, I kind of worked around it and always got to actually what is it we're trying to achieve, and listen and discuss. And it was challenging. I faced some challenging behaviors, whether it was in that role with Toyota or throughout my career. And actually it's been able to say, well, okay, fair enough, that's the point of view, but can you just explain, or can you please tell me? Or being able to repeat back some of the things that they may say in a different way, so they can hear some of the behaviors maybe that when you're faced with some difficulties. But I think if you actually back yourself and actually you come to the table with what you're trying to achieve and what you can deliver, that kind of fades into the background and you garner their respect. And they do take you for what you can achieve and what you can deliver. So for me, it's about actually being confident in yourself in terms of what you're doing and what you're delivering, and actually focus on that rather than what anybody else may think about you. So it's back yourself and take it from there. That would be my advice, and that's now, or even in the position that I am, in terms of the work I do with the Ministry of Education and working with the industry.
Great, thank you very much, Alison. Now, I have a question for you, Alice. This comes from our friends at KPMG. A big shout out to you, Maya. Introducing and embracing social and sustainable procurement can be a game changer in New Zealand. What are your thoughts on this, and how can we work together to make an impact? This is holus bolus in your camp. Alice, talk to us and get us all on board.
I love this question. So we could have a whole session on this question. So I think there's a multifaceted nature to this, to achieving outcomes. And I think I'm going to pick back up on the whole partnership approach with organizations, industry, key suppliers, communities, to get to the point where we can say, right, here are our priorities. Do we actually have a match on these? Because I think what we can do as organizations is operate in silo and go, right, these are our social and sustainable values, and these are our social and sustainable values, and these are our social and sustainable values. And if there's a misalignment there between ourselves, our suppliers, and our community, we run the risk of going, well, perhaps us as the organization procuring achieved what we want to achieve with our outcomes, but did the community get the outcomes that they wanted? That voice of the community is so important. And because we are working in this commercial relationship with our suppliers, what about that? What about that value set there? Are we actually operating from a space that we both want to achieve these things? I think that collective sort of, we're all on the same path, we're all on the same road, is really important. And we can't do that without first having relationships built, but also talking about those things, making sure we are all aligned. This is the direction we're going to go. Now, is that approach linear and really smooth and easy to implement? No, of course not. But what it looks like in practice, and let me speak to Waka Kotahi for a bit here, is that our broader outcomes program, that by the time it's fully realised in sort of next 6 to 12 months, once we stand it up, so we'll have an organisational strategy, there'll be a training education program, there'll be an online sort of hub type community area, there'll be a reporting and monitoring framework, there'll be a continuous improvement sort of governance type group, and that's just to uplift ourselves as organisation in this area. That doesn't even speak to the learnings and the journey that we're going to go on with our suppliers necessarily. That's a whole different ball game. So understanding where you are in terms of your social and sustainable procurement journey first needs to happen, so then you can then communicate it effectively to your industry and the market, and you can actually work together on these things. And again, coming back to that whole marathon journey, we might not get it right. There might be times where we make mistakes, we fail, KPIs aren't hit, there's additional costs that come in that we haven't scoped for, projects change, natural disasters happen, COVID hits, like all these things that we don't necessarily plan for or can ever foresee. that's when we need to fall back in our relationships and go, right, same values here, same outcomes. How are we going to get that solution to get those outcomes right? Because at the end of the day, at Waka Kotahi, and it's the same for a lot of our other public sector partners here, we're here for the community. So how can we break through whatever challenges that achieving these outcomes are happening to make sure the community benefit most? And I think, again, if we're all on the same page with that at the beginning, finding resolutions to getting those outcomes achieved becomes a lot more simple than if we didn't have those relationships and value alignment and connectedness on the outcomes themselves. So we just got to get together and do it, really, at the end of the day. And it is really easy to say that, but if we are all on the same page and we do all want to make impact, and procurement's changing, man. So we have the rise of the conscious consumer. It's not just happening in organizations, it's happening on an individual level. People will be becoming more and more aware about how they can make an impact with a dollar they spend. So I think the journey that we're all going to go on individually and how that's going to seep through, our organizational front doors, I think that's going to have real power to see how we switch this industry up, particularly for infrastructure, considering the significant amount of spend that we have in this area. There is so much opportunity, and I'm so pumped for the stuff that's already happened. There has been pockets of greatness where you've had people that have really championed this, either in the face of processes that haven't actually enabled it, but they fought for it. So what we're doing across government, and it is happening across government, and I can really only speak to Waka Kotahi at the moment, but trying to set those foundations to make sure that our processes and practice and values all enable those outcomes to happen. That's kind of our key at the moment. It's a super exciting space. So I'm really glad that question has come up. That shows me that we're all keen beans to get some good stuff done.
Look, if you don't switch this audience over to being procurement fans, Alice, I don't know who else could. Your enthusiasm is absolutely contagious. Now, Tara, I have a tricky one for you. This attendee is keen to hear if the goals being set by the construction accord are reaching procurement managers as contractors continue to battle against unfair apportionment of risk in construction contracts. How are the contracting limits of government organisations changing to accommodate the goals of the construction sector accord? Over to you, Tara.
This is a great question. So firstly, I just want to reassure all of the listeners today that absolutely the construction sector accord is very much front and centre, and all of the Crown government agencies and now filtering into local authorities are really getting in behind it. I think they're doing an incredible job. I sit on one of the advisory groups with respect to the construction sector accord. We have our CE that actually sits in one of the governing bodies with respect to the accord as well. So we're well and truly infiltrated in it. So the reason why the construction sector accord is really important is it is a joint commitment between government and our construction sector. So it was co-designed, co-created, because for us to be successful, we need an absolutely viable construction sector. We are heavily dependent on each other. With respect to the goals of the construction sector accord, I come back to our new approaches because I just want to highlight how we're putting it into effect. So at the heart of our new infrastructure procurement approaches and the changes they want to put into effect, and very much at the heart of this is what has actually been set out in the construction sector accord. So yes, we have our transport system outcomes that we're striving for in terms of multimodal outcomes, connecting communities to social and economic opportunities, but very much alongside that is those construction sector outcomes that we're seeking as well, and that is underpinned by the construction sector accord. We constantly hear feedback from industry around risk allocation or risk transfer, as they often see that a lot of risk gets transferred onto industry. We see a lot of it in Australia, and we've been looking around Australia and the UK around how they manage risk through the life cycle of their projects. And what our principle is that risk should sit with the party that's most that can best manage that. So that one's dear to our hearts with respect to our new approaches and how we want to make sure that we get that right, and it's appropriate risk allocation moving forward through the life cycle of our projects. And look, the other one that really stands out for us in the construction sector accord is building skills and capability across the construction sector. You see that coming through in terms of our broader outcomes framework and strategy, that their work that Alice has been undertaking. We're really bringing that to life about how we can incentivize those outcomes throughout our procurement activities. So yes, construction sector accord very much alive and well. We all have plans, and we make those highly visible in terms of how we're contributing to the outcomes set out by the accord, and we're fully committed to putting those into effect, as are our sister agencies as well.
Sorry, it's Alison. I just wanted to jump in if I could, just to add a little bit more information. I think maybe more targeted to sort of the terms and conditions. So in terms of, we have a number of people attending from consultancy organisations on the call, I believe, Sarah. So number of members on this group, so including NZTA and Kianga Ora, but also health, etc. We had a Crown collaboration group where we negotiated with industry bodies the CCCS conditions, which now form the underpin the AOG consultancy services. So that was an agreed risk position in terms of the conditions, the special conditions, which work with CCCS. So that wasn't necessarily an accord initiative, but that was a Crown agency-led activity supported by MB, negotiating with industry bodies such as the NZIA and ACE, and MB picked those up and then now used by the AOG. There's also through the Accord a workstream initiative which is looking at the NZ 3910 and other construction contracts in terms of that risk transfer and the conditions as part of that piece. So I know that's a project that Infracom and as part of the Accord are going to be leading on as one of those working groups to look at risk and where that risk sits within not only government contracts but also industry contracts as well.
Fantastic. That's really crunchy stuff that I'm sure many of our viewers today will appreciate. So thank you both, Tara and Alison. Well, before we wrap up, this hour has gone very quickly. We could have been here all day, I think. What we have had is a really nice question, career-wise. So just to wrap up, what piece of advice would you give to your 18-year-old self? What piece of advice would you give to your 18-year-old self? And I'm going to start with you, Andrea. What piece of advice for our listeners today would you share?
Gosh, I can hear my mother's voice. So it's not so much the advice, just that I would give myself. I was privileged to grow up in a household with a very strong mum, and my sister and I aren't exactly wallflowers, even if I'd like to say I'm still a bit introverted, to the point actually, Sarah, that my mum owned her own printing company and set up a women in printing network, which is pretty unusual actually. Offset printing back at that time was very male dominated. So the advice I would give myself would be get over trying to be a perfectionist. No matter what you're going to do, it's not going to be perfect. Getting it done is better than perfection. Trust your gut. I think particularly as a younger woman, there is this thing about maybe trying to rationalize a little bit too much what your instincts are. And actually over years and years, you actually just realize those instincts are actually bang on the money and trust those. And the other thing is pick a job for the organisation and the people with whom you have values alignment. For me personally, if I'm working with someone or in an organisation where the values don't line up with mine, that's an incredibly difficult situation to feel like I'm making my best possible contribution, or perhaps working outside my comfort zone is really, really awkward for me. So it's not necessarily the job, but the people that you get to work with and the people that you get to work for and those learning opportunities and that values alignment in terms of navigating a career. Those three things, I think, were things like my 18-year-old self could have done with some advice. And I think they're probably good advice even now at my substantially older than 18-year-old self.
Thank you very much, Andrea. So we'll go to somebody who isn't very far away from being 18, and that's you, Alice. Give us one tip. I'm conscious of time here. Give us one tip that you think would be valuable for some of our listeners today.
Thanks, Sarah. 25 and alive, almost 26. Okay, it's hard. We could do a whole session on this as well. The one thing that I'm going to say is seek mentorship early, and that doesn't have to be in a career sense as well. To be a better human, that doesn't stop when your organizational doors happen, or not, and vice versa. So if you want to grow as a person, seek mentorship from people who have fruit on the tree, because people will change your life. Role, title, salary, don't. It's the people that make the difference. So yeah, pick someone who you totally vibe with, and you think you have a lot to learn from. Chase them down, bother them lots, and then hopefully they'll be your mentor.
I love it. I love it. Now, Tara, what are you going to share with us today?
Oh, look, I wish at 18 years of age someone had said to me, network, network, network. And I'm sure that's why a lot of women and men are on this call today. Don't underestimate the power of your network. You have to work hard on it, but building strong relationships across your network. People will open doors for you. They will shape you. They will support you. They will, just to be able to bounce ideas off, grow a diverse network, and don't be afraid to reach out to people and kind of ask for help, or to, people are, my perception is that people are only too happy to help. So take advantage of that. We all love to give back, and really work on a strong network from very early on.
Great advice. And, that really speaks to this WIN network, nearly 2,000 members across 7 chapters in New Zealand. If you haven't been active, get involved. There'll be a chapter near you, and you never know who you might meet and what opportunities might arise through that. Alison, one final tip before we wrap up today.
Okay, my tip then would be, we spend a lot of time at work during our lives. So make sure you enjoy it and get some satisfaction from it.
Very wise words. It's easy to be passionate about something that you enjoy. Absolutely. Now, everybody. Oh, I think I'm audible there. Yes. Great. Now, everybody, just to wrap up, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. A big thanks to our 4 fantastic panellists. Some quick announcements from Infrastructure New Zealand. Building Nations is coming up in November. Our fantastic speaker today, Alison Murray, will be speaking on a session around improving social infrastructure, representing the Ministry of Education. So come and hear Alison for yourself. I'm sure a number of our other panellists will also be attending Building Nations. And of course, Alice is going to be on the judging panel for the Excellence in Social Impact Award. She will be there too. Everybody, thank you very much for tuning in today. A big thank you for everybody. As I said before, it's been a tough year. Be easy on yourselves, be gentle on others, and we will make it to the end. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Kia ora whānau.
Thanks, Sarah, for having us. Thanks, WIN Infrastructure.
Great.